That's a sonic boom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the commemoration ceremony marking the 75th anniversary of the first supersonic flight here at Edwards Air Force Base on October 14th, 1947. I am Adam Bowles from the 412 Test Wing Public Affairs, and I am honored to be your MC for today's ceremony. As a reminder, please silence all phones and radios. Today, we reflect as well as pay tribute to the courageous team that together drove to the world of new feats of human achievement. Our theme, breaking tomorrow's barriers today. While we are celebrating our past achievements of teamwork and resilience, we are also looking ahead to our proud heritage that leads to the future of aviation technology and innovation here on Edwards Air Force Base and beyond. Please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Edwards Air Force Base Blue Eagles Honor Guard and the singing of our national anthem by Master Sergeant Marshall Merriweather from the 412th Logistics Readiness Squadron.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Blue Eagles Honor Guard and Master Sergeant Merriweather. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, please bring your attention to the screen for a video on the history of 75 years of supersonic flight.
"75 years ago, to the very day, America's young Air Force, hardly a month into life as its own service, did something remarkable, something which up until that moment, many bright minds in aviation were not convinced was even possible. On October 14, 1947, right here at Edwards Air Force Base, the United States flew an aircraft in level flight faster than the speed of sound. That aircraft, the Bell X-1, piloted by Captain Chuck Yeager, achieved the milestone with little room to spare, hitting a top speed of Mach 1.1. The X-1 was a collaborative effort between the Air Force and the NACA, the agency now known as NASA. The tiny and unassuming X-1 was designed specifically to handle the difficulties of transonic flight. Several innovative design features that made the X-1's historic flight possible, not least of which was the general shape of the aircraft. For aerodynamic inspiration, Bell engineers looked almost exclusively to the Browning 50 caliber machine gun round, one of the few objects known to fly faster than sound at the time. Other significant engineering innovations were its thin wings, using rocket propulsion, and an all-moving horizontal stabilizer. The next Mach milestone wouldn't come for more than another 6 years. On December 12, 1953, this time in the Bell X-1 Alpha, Chuck Yeager achieved another level flight record, flying nearly 2.5 times the speed of sound to Mach 2.43. Mach 3 came 3 years later. On September 27, 1956, this accomplishment put a new name and a brand new aircraft in the record books. Piloting the Bell X-2, Captain M.G. Apt pushed that aircraft to more than 3 times the speed of sound, achieving a
ripped
new
apart
record
mid-flight,
of Mach 3.19.
killing its pilot, Captain N.G. Apt, and destroying the aircraft. The X-2 would never fly again. Although it took nearly 9 years to go from Mach 1 to Mach 3, it only took 9 months to check off boxes 4, 5, and 6. All 3 achievements were made with the same aircraft and pilot, Captain Robert White flew the X-15 into the history books. He was not the only one, however. On October 3, 1967, William Pete Knight pushed the X-15 to Mach 6.72, setting a record that still stands today. While the supersonic X-planes broke, set, and broke again several records, the data collected during these flights went on to influence aviation in significant ways. NASA used the data to help design the space shuttle and put man on the moon. The universally loved SR-71, an incredible aircraft designed exclusively for speed and wasn't comfortable until cruising at a leisurely Mach 3. Using lessons and technology from the Supersonic X-plane research, the SR-71 still holds the record for the fastest crewed jet aircraft ever flown. Even today, engineers are looking to this data as the hypersonic weapons race continues to intensify. NASA is still pushing the boundaries of supersonic flight. The X-59 is the agency's latest such effort. With this project, NASA hopes to tie the supersonic X-plane legacy up in a wonderful bow of irony as it attempts to transform the once elusive, but now intrusive, car alarm triggering, heartbeat skipping, phone call generating, world-renowned extremely loud iconic sound of freedom, the traditional sonic boom, into a much less disruptive sonic thud. If successful, the X-59 research will open up supersonic commercial air travel, not only from coast to coast in the US, but well beyond its shores. As that and other innovations are developed in super and hypersonic technology, you can bet Edwards Air Force Base, like it has since day one, will be a leading test bed as it continues to maintain the American warfighter's edge by breaking tomorrow's barriers today.
Please stand when recognized. From the Air Force Test Center, Major General Evan Dertine, Commander. Dr. Eileen Bjorkman, Executive Director. Colonel Michael Baker, Vice Commander. Dr. John Grigolounis, Technical Advisor. From the 412 Test Wing, Brigadier General Matthew Heiger, Commander, and his wife Leslie and their son Zev. Colonel Matthew Caspers, Vice Commander, and his wife Sally and their 3 children, Ava, Noah, and Owen. Dr. Dan Osborne, Senior Technical Advisor, and his wife Kathy. We would also like to recognize Dr. Robert D. Cabana, Associate Administrator for NASA, and our guest speaker for today's ceremony. The Bell X-1 team, family and relatives. California congressional members and elected officials. U.S. Air Force special guests, our community leaders, Rear Admiral Keith Hash, Commander, Naval Air Warfare Center, Weapons Division. All commanders, directors, chiefs, and first sergeants, and our friends and family of Team Edwards. Please welcome to the stage Brigadier General Matthew Heiger, Commander, 412 Test Wing.
Good morning, everyone. What an awesome sight to be here. What an awesome sight to see. I'm not quite 75 years old, but my eyeballs are getting up there, so give me a second. So over the next couple minutes, I'd like to take you on a little journey. A journey in your mind, a journey through a little bit of history, and then into the future. So if you will, all of you, imagine being here, like literally where we are on the globe right now, 75 years ago, this day, this hour, this minute, 9:15 a.m., Tuesday, it was a Tuesday, 14 October 1947. The United States Air Force was not even as old as the United States Space Force is today. I mean, it was still in diapers. Harry Truman was the President of the United States. This hangar 1600, this entire maintenance complex would not exist, nor would the ramp outside this glorious and historic building, nor would the iconic control tower or any of what we know as Edwards Main Base today. None of it would have existed 75 years ago. But 75 years ago, there certainly was a small contingent of Big A airmen. And by Big A, I mean military, civilian, and contractors working that direction north of us at today what we call North Base. Where just a few years back, earlier in the 1940s, a team of Americans clandestinely flew our nation's first jet-powered aircraft, the XP-59 Alpha. One of only 3 XP-59 Alphas ever built is today the centerpiece of Flag Park, appropriately across the street from Building 1 here at the center of the aerospace testing universe, also known as Takata 2. For those of you visiting today to Takata 2 for the first time, or maybe you just haven't been by it in a while, Building 1 is the location Takata 2 proudly flies our nation's colors 24/7, 365. It is also the headquarters of the Air Force Test Center, but it wasn't here 75 years ago either. If we were here 75 years ago, we'd likely be standing in the desert. Maybe, just maybe, we'd even see antelope. The mission we remember and celebrate at this ceremony today was generated by another team of Big A airmen, performing their individual expert tasks, contributing to an event larger than any one individual, and selflessly serving our nation across that dry lake bed approximately 2 miles to our south. Today, we refer to that cantonment area as South Base. The South Base runway today, literally, is where the B-29 mothership departed with the X-1 and a captain and precious cargo under her wing into the blue sky over the Mojave Desert. If you've never seen it, I highly encourage you to go view the X-1 pit, still there on the South Base ramp. It is hollowed ground, or rather I should say hallowed concrete. And when you're standing there, look around and imagine being a part of the team that made it happen. Imagine your role. What role would you have played 75 years ago today if you were not here in the desert with the antelope, but down on South Base with a group of individuals that were ready to do something that some said could never be done? Imagine being the pilot on the X-1 that may or may not have broken ribs. Imagine being the crew on the mothership, the B-29. Are we ever going to see that guy again? Is everything going to go all right? How are the engines going to hold out? Imagine being the crew chief, the maintenance team that launched and prepared the airplane. You saw a little video of it. Imagine being the team that had to mate the X-1 to the wing of the mothership. Imagine being the engineer that designed the pit because we didn't want to lift the airplane. Instead, we wanted to lower something under its wing. Imagine being the aircraft designer that figured out a bullet goes supersonic. Why can't an airplane? Imagine being the structural engineer that said, you want my wing to withstand what force? Imagine being the hydraulics engineer or the propulsion engineer that were given insurmountable and never before achieved tasks. Imagine, if you will, being the human that was the calculator. That's what they called the mathematicians in that era, calculators. Imagine being the rocket engineer, the aircraft builder, the people that literally built and bent the metal. Imagine, if you will, being the maintainers, the ones that literally kicked the tires, that rotated the tires, that gassed the thing, that put some liquid on it, that greased it. Imagine being the back shop that supported those maintainers, the tug drivers, the people that pulled the chocks. Imagine being the technical equipment custodians of the gear that Captain Yeager was wearing that day. Imagine being his crew chief. Imagine being his crew chief. Imagine being the fuel truck driver, the logistics professionals that got the fuel on the truck, that got the supplies, the fuel, the equipment to the installation. Imagine being the firefighters, the first responders. Imagine being the defenders. Imagine being the flight doc. Imagine all the other medical techs. Imagine you being part of the back shop support. Imagine you being one of the trades laborers that literally built the ramp, the pit, the runways, the airfield, and the buildings that were used by the X-1 team that day. Imagine being the financial accountants, the project managers, the program managers. Imagine being a part of that Bell X-1 team. Can you all imagine that? And there are countless other individuals overwhelmingly working in areas that today we would know as STEM professions. Imagine being a part of that team. They knew, as we know today, that test, like life, is a team sport. And you succeed and you fail as a team. Now, sometimes there are individual heroics that really matter to the team. Think about football. Think about basketball. Think about flight test. Often there's the one individual that has the most at risk, or their critical skills in that moment are the most valuable. But it does not happen like life without being a part of an exceptional team. And that was an exceptional team at South Base 75 years ago, right now, today. So folks, I have a somber notification to make in my remarks here. The sonic booms you heard, and maybe many of you felt, they're pretty common here, but the ones that you felt that began our ceremony today were sadly created by the last aircraft ever to fly in the high-altitude supersonic corridor. Never again will aircraft fly in the high-altitude supersonic corridor that goes over this installation. It has hosted thousands and probably tens of thousands of hours of flight above Mach 1 the last 75 years. But the high-altitude supersonic corridor is officially dead. It's a national treasure. The airspace isn't going away, but just the name. So rest in peace, high-altitude supersonic corridor, the name. That piece of airspace, a critical component of the R-2508 complex that not just the United States Air Force uses, but all of the Department of Defense, including our partners at China Lake, our partners in the rest of the Southwest U.S., and certainly our partners at NASA. Today, we rename that chunk of airspace, that critical piece of our infrastructure in the test and training environment, in honor and in memory of the team of Big A Airmen, whose collective individual contributions coalesced into something much more powerful than they could have ever imagined. Indeed, more powerful than the coalesced air pressure on the front edge of an airplane that creates the pressure differential that your ears hear as a boom. In their honor and their memory, effective with the next booms you hear, we officially christen that high-altitude supersonic corridor the Bell X-1 Supersonic Corridor, in their memory and in their honor. Now, we all know today, because it's a historical artifact, that the speed of sound was not a barrier. It wasn't a wall. It wasn't impenetrable. It was just a challenge that simply became a historic milestone. I ask you, what challenges face us today as individuals, that face us as teams, that face us as Big A Airmen, as STEM professionals, as a nation, and as the Western world? What challenges, what barriers face us today? And have we labeled those challenges as barriers unnecessarily? So I ask you again, think about it. Think about a barrier. What did you hear in your mind? Did you hear hypersonic flight, manned flight? Did you hear artificial intelligence? Did you hear the barrier or the challenge of autonomy? Maybe you're an Uber geek, go geeks, and you heard we have to crack the space-time continuum. Maybe it's encryption, maybe it's computing speed. Maybe the challenge and the barrier that you're aware of and that you thought of was a material science challenge. Maybe it was a medical challenge. I assert that many of the barriers of tomorrow that we break today here at Takata 2 and in our Air Force and in our nation's aerospace industry and in academia, among countless other organizations that are going to break tomorrow's barriers today, those so-called barriers aren't physics barriers like Mach 1 was. Many of the barriers are personal. Some are organizational. Some are scientific issues. Some are systemic, but some are societal too. Let's break all those barriers, not just the tech ones. As but one example of a barrier that has been painfully slow to fall for our nation and the Western world, I now ask you to think again about that X1 team. Think about them. Not you as them, but think about them. That's a team that we honored here today with the renaming of the corridor in about 3 minutes and 32 seconds. How many women were on that team? Think about it. How many men on that team were not of European ancestry or descent? Think about it. How many were of some other underrepresented group? Think about it. And now, literally, look around you. Look around you. This is the team that is doing tests today, because test is a team sport. And ask yourself those questions that I just asked you. It's here. That is a barrier that we are proud to have seen fall. And can you imagine the benefits that we all enjoy today, and we will in the future because of us? Yes, all of us, each and every one of us, because we have the opportunity to contribute to our fullest potential here at Takata 2, here in the Air Force, here in the Aerospace Valley, and yes, here in America. As our nation, her allies, and her partners are engaged in geopolitical competition with adversaries that aim to change our way of life and literally wipe democratic, peace-loving nations from the face of the planet, our collective contributions as a team, because life, like combat, like flight test, because life is a team sport, our contribution as teams, each of us having the opportunity to contribute to our fullest potential, is a competitive advantage our adversaries cannot match. So I'm going to get off the stage here after 3 more things happen. 1, thank you. Thank you for being here. General Durtine, Administrator Cabrera, thank you for being here. Admiral Hash, thank you for being here. To all the other leaders in attendance, thank you for being here. Another big round of thanks goes to the folks that actually made this happen. So please join me in a round of applause for the Blue Eagles Honor Guard, for the singer of our national anthem, and the committee that put this together. My second thing is a charge. It's a charge to all of you that I am looking at. It's a charge to all of you that are out in the greater audience. And it's a charge to you that hear my remarks. I charge you to go interact with our future. Go interact with kids ages 3 to 13 and enjoy their wonder as they experience science, technology, engineering, and math in this hangar, on this flight line, on this base, and wherever they experience it. Go interact with them. Help them find their role in breaking tomorrow's barriers today. Can you do that for me? Can you go do that for us and for our nation? Can you? Thank you. And the last thing that has to happen before I get off this stage today is not something I'm going to do, but it's something we all hear and feel. Wait for it. You're thinking about it, aren't you? You're anticipating it. I am.
There you go. Bell X-1 corridor. Thank you, General Higer. At this time, please direct your attention to the screen for remarks by the Honorable Frank Kendall, Secretary of the United States Air Force.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Supersonic Flight with you. Thank you to the 412th Test Wing team and the organizers that put this together. I'm also grateful and humbled to know we have family and relatives from the original Bell X-1 team in the audience. The event we're celebrating was momentous, not just for our air and space forces, and not just for our nation, but for the whole world. It was a moment when something that so many people thought was impossible became a reality. It inspired not just a generation, but multiple generations of people involved in the many technological feats that propelled America to be the global leader that it is today. For many people, that historic moment calls to mind the scene popularized by Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff. Because of his broken ribs, Captain Chuck Yeager used a broomstick to close the hatch on the X-1 before flying into what he called the unknown. All of you know better than anyone that the full story is about much more than one pilot. That day, 75 years ago, was the result of years of effort by a committed team building on the efforts of those before them. It required the right stuff in design, scientific knowledge, engineering, manufacturing, maintenance, and operations, even if they didn't all get written into the book. Once that team achieved the supposed impossible, our country continued to race ahead in the technologies that help preserve security for decades to come, to usher in the most prosperous era of human history, and to inspire a future without limits. That journey continues. In 1947, our country was at the beginning of a long struggle against an expanding authoritarian power with a radically different view of the world. That competitor was committed to developing and using technology to further its interests and undermine the values of liberty that America had just fought so hard to preserve. Our nation is at a similar moment today. We face a well-resourced and motivated strategic competitor harnessing science and technology for its authoritarian goals. The ingenuity and dedication from the Bell X-1 team that we are celebrating today is just as important now as it was then. The milestone we achieved in 1947 was clear and measurable. On October 14th, a sonic boom reverberated across the desert with unmistakable evidence that the world had entered a new era of flight. A decade later, the Soviet Union launched the world's first artificial satellite on an R-7 rocket. That was the world's first ICBM. The implications of these technological achievements on global security were very clear. We might not have another sound barrier or Sputnik moment when we can clearly measure our nation's place in the technological race for security, but the race continues. The race continues with hypersonics, artificial intelligence, automation, machine learning, quantum computing, and other emerging technologies. The race continues because our nation remains committed to harnessing those technologies in ways that expand security, prosperity, and liberty, while authoritarian competitors seek them to expand their capacity to coerce and deny freedom. That's why the teamwork, resilience, and innovation we celebrate today are so important. It's not just because it reminds us of a proud heritage. It's because it inspires us to press forward into a turbulent future. That's also why I'm so happy here this event is coupled with the largest STEM expo in our Air Force history, with 12,000 students waiting to be a part of our heritage and our future. Let them know how much we need them to be a part of our team. They are the future innovators and leaders that will carry the baton of security, prosperity, and liberty that we pass on to them, the same baton we carry from those before us. I'd like to imagine that baton as the broomstick Captain Yeager carried in that Bell X-1. Thank you for celebrating and carrying on the heritage of innovation and breaking barriers, and thank you for letting me celebrate it with you. One team, one fight.
Please keep your attention to the screen for remarks by General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force.
Hi, I'm General C.Q. Brown, Jr.,
I'm
Air
General
Force
C.Q.
Chief of
Brown,
Staff.
Jr., Air
It
Force
is my
Chief of
pleasure
Staff.
to commemorate
It is
the
my
75th
pleasure to
anniversary
commemorate
of
the
breaking the
75th
sound barrier,
of breaking the
along
sound
with
barrier,
the 75th
along
anniversary
with the
of our
75th
service.
anniversary
From
of
our
our
inception,
service. From our inception, the Air Force has excelled at keeping pace with rapid changes in innovation and technology, and the Airmen of Edwards Air Force Base are no exception. I'm proud to celebrate the important accomplishments and the pioneering spirit of the test airmen at Edwards Air Force Base that started with the Bell X-1 team in the first supersonic flight 75 years ago. A spirit that for 75 years has led to building and sustaining Air Force capabilities that dominate the skies. But our success has not been unchallenged. When challenged, it has been teamwork, dedication, and support from our great nation that have paved the way to success. These are the attributes that position us to break tomorrow's barriers today. We must continue to accelerate these attributes in the pursuit of today's dreams so they become tomorrow's realities. As your 22nd Chief of Staff, I'm proud to celebrate our 75-year heritage of pushing the envelope, doing what the complacent dare not try, and accomplishing what most would call impossible. But most of all, I'm proud of our airmen, dating back to the Bell X-1 team, whose accomplishments we honor today, to those who continue to press the boundaries of the unknown so our U.S. Air Force can continue to fly, fight, and win air power anytime, anywhere. Congratulations to Team Edwards as we celebrate this significant milestone in our Air Force history.
Thank you, General Brown. At this time, to represent our NASA partners, please welcome to the stage Mr. Robert Cabana, Associate Administrator.
I hate being tied to a podium. Let's go to the next slide. All right, well, first off, I want to thank Generals Durteen and Higer for the partnership that we have. As General Higer said, flight test is a team sport, and the partnership that we have at NASA with the Air Force here and now the Space Force also is absolutely outstanding. And I want to thank all the community leaders in the audience. Thank you for your support of what we do here at the lake bed. Now, like General Higer, I wasn't alive when Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. But I want you to know it was in 1946 that engineers, a test team from Langley, came out here as part of NACA, the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, to work on that research. And they were here as part of that Air Force, a very young Air Force, and NACA team when Chuck broke that sound barrier. I did read all the books about Chuck Yeager and all the flight test engineers and test pilots of the 50s and 60s. And that's what motivated me. And today we're going to have thousands of students coming in here to see what our nation does in flight tests and the expertise that is here. And I'm hoping that they're going to be as motivated as I was to pursue a career in STEM. And who knows, one of them might even end up being the first person on Mars one day. You never know. Now, I do have a slight tie to Chuck Yeager. When my test pilot school class was out here, I flew Air Force F4 and landed it on the lake bed. And when they were suiting me up, they had to find flight gear that fit me. And apparently, Chuck and I are the same size because I wore Chuck's torso harness. It was at Air Force Test Pilot School. It said Yeager on it. So that's my tie to Chuck Yeager. Next slide. So, you know, we have had this partnership for a long time, and I look at all the research that's gone on. The Armstrong Flight Research Center, of course, is named after Neil Armstrong. Neil flew the F-15 and, of course, was the first person to walk on the moon. We've been out here for a long time doing flight research. What Armstrong has done, digital flight control, supercritical wings, forward swept wings, oblique wings, you name it. We have worked together with the Air Force and taken those technologies that we've demonstrated, and they've made our aircraft better. Next slide. So I'm not a stranger to the lake bed. I got to fly the Navy evaluation of NASA's 81 oblique wing aircraft out here. And I spent many, many weekends out here on Sunday morning flying the shuttle training aircraft, practicing those lake bed landings and landings to the runway here in preparation for my shuttle missions. Next slide. We should have had a monitor up here so I could see. Can I get the next slide? So that's what it looks like out the window in the orbiter going into runway 22. I had 2 landings out here, but I was the pilot. Okay, the pilot is really the co-pilot, and the commander is the pilot in command. But pilots don't like being called co-pilot, so they call them the commander and the pilot. So I was the pilot twice, and I actually got stick time coming around the heading alignment circle, coming on to final before the commander took over and actually landed it. Now, the pilot's got a very important job. The pilot has to lower the landing gear on the space shuttle, and at 1,600 feet, you arm the gear. At 1,400 feet, you press the button that lowers the landing gear, and then the commander lands it, right? So I successfully lowered the landing gear twice, so they let me be the commander. If you don't get the landing gear down, that's kind of career limiting. So my 2 landings that I got to land the space shuttle when I was commander were at the Kennedy Space Center. Apparently my commanders couldn't make it there. They had to come here. Next slide. So that's NASA's mission. That's a pretty daunting mission, isn't it? It's pretty darn cool. Next slide. How are we doing that? So you saw about the X-59. It's being built at Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works down in Palmdale. And I was down there looking at it the last time I was out here. And that wing is a work of art. It is absolutely beautiful. You can't see out the front window. If you remember the supersonic transport of the 60s, the nose drooped so the pilot could see. This is all virtual. They're TV cameras in order to take off and land. But this is a technology demonstrator, all right? We are going to go out and produce a sonic boom that, as that video said, is more like a thud instead of that sharp boom that we just heard that we all love, so that we can have supersonic travel across populated areas. So this is a demonstrator to prove that we can do that, and then we're going to take it and fly it all over the United States and see what kind of noise complaints we get when we go out and boom the nation, all right? And the goal is to not make such a sharp boom that you're causing trouble. I remember when I was at Pax River, an F-14 was going supersonic, and they were doing it low altitude in a turn, and that focused the boom on this shopping center and took out all the windows in the shopping center. We don't want to do that, all right? We want to be able to fly safely at supersonic speeds with people, and we're going to get the test flight out on this. I got to fly the simulator. It was awesome. And I can't wait for this technology demonstrator, Quest, to go out and prove that we can build a supersonic aircraft with a low boom. Next slide. So this is another X-plane that we're flying, and it's really cool to be back in the X-plane business. This is the Maxwell X-57, and this is an electronic aircraft, a battery-powered aircraft, all right? And it's going to fly and prove the technologies that we need to actually have electric-powered aircraft. Depending on the funding and how things go, it's going to fly this demonstration, and then there's more work that can be done. But this is technology that's being turned over to industry. Hopefully we'll fly that first flight before the end of this year. Next slide. The airspace, oh my goodness. It's changing, right? We're going to have drones flying in it. We're going to have air taxis that aren't even piloted flying in it. How do you incorporate all that into today's airspace. NASA is working with the FAA to develop the technology to allow that to happen. NASA's already worked with the FAA and done a demonstration at Charlotte Airport in North Carolina on how to integrate aircraft into the flow so that there's less time sitting on the aircraft. How many of you have taken, you pull back from the gate and you wait an hour and a half before you take off? We're going to eliminate that, all right? And they proved that they can do it. They saved, I don't know how many million gallons of gas by doing this and how much more efficient it was. They're doing this program now, and it's folks up at the Ames Research Center that have worked this all out down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where they have more than one aircraft. So NASA's working on integrating all this into the airspace and then turning that over to the FAA. Next slide. Technologies for the future. We are going to build sustainable aircraft. And if you read in the four corners there, you can see the four technologies that we're working on. But this is a truss brace wing, a highly efficient wing. We're looking at how we can have greener fuels. The goal is to have net zero carbon by 2050, all right, with sustainable fuels, more efficient engines, and more aircraft that are much more efficient than today's aircraft. Now, these technologies are more aimed at the commercial industry, all right, but as with all our technologies, when we demonstrate them and we build these aircraft, it also bleeds over into all aviation. Next slide. All right, so aviation is really cool. It's what motivated me to want to be a pilot and a test pilot and eventually become an astronaut. But NASA's doing some really cool stuff in space too, and I want to share that with you. And we all know about the Ingenuity, on Mars, that amazing rover, Perseverance. It's absolutely awesome, all right? And Ingenuity is the helicopter that's on the Perseverance rover. We've actually flown on another planet. And we're actually going to use the technology. That was a technology demonstrator. We're doing a Mars sample return mission. We're going to go to Mars, and right now Perseverance rover has collected over like 16 samples of Mars. And we're going to bring those back to Earth. And in doing that, as a backup, in case the rover breaks down, it's going to set a bunch of samples on the ground, and then it's going to go where this lander is going to come to pick up the samples from the rover. But as a backup, we're flying a helicopter, 2 of them actually, to Mars that can actually go pick up these samples and bring them back to the spacecraft that's going to take them back to Earth. And that's because of what we learned flying the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars. And that's pretty darn cool. And Mars is the ultimate goal. That's where we're going with humans. Next slide. So we are flying humans to space, but we want to commercialize low Earth orbit and then focus on that hard job of exploring beyond our home planet, having a sustainable presence on the moon and going on to Mars. Recently, we just launched the 5th crew under contract on a commercial spacecraft to the International Space Station. And Crew 4, the crew that's up there right now, weather precluded it the other day, but it looks like they're going to be coming home tomorrow, landing in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see how things go. Next slide. Artemis. So Artemis is our program that's going to the moon. And you probably heard about our big rocket, the Space Launch System. So we had to roll back into the barn. We were out on the pad, and we weren't able to get off in our last window. And we had this little storm, little. So this hurricane that came into the Gulf got really bad, that warm water of the Gulf, and it came right across Florida, and it went right between the 2 launch pads at the Kennedy Space Center. And Pad B was where this rocket was sitting, and we didn't want to risk it, so we rolled it back into the Vehicle Assembly Building. We're going to roll it back out. We've solved all our problems, but this is what's taking us back to the moon, the Space Launch System with the Orion spacecraft and the Artemis program. And we're going back in a sustainable way, not like we did during the Apollo program for a 2 or 3 day camping trip, but we're going back to actually use the resources on the moon to learn how to live and operate away from our home planet on a harsh foreign body for a long period of time in preparation for going to Mars. And this is the rocket that's going to get us there. Right now, it looks like we're going to try and launch around the 14th of November on this test flight without a crew. Then Artemis 2 will fly a crew to the moon but not land on the moon. And Artemis 3 will be the first landing on the moon. And we're developing the lander for that and all that we need to make that happen. And then we hope to have a 1-year flight with sustainable operations on the moon with habitats, rovers, and take all that technology, utilizing the resources on the moon. There's ice on the moon, water ice at the South Pole. That's hydrogen, that's oxygen to breathe, that's fuel, and eventually going on to Mars. Next slide. The James Webb Space Telescope. It has been absolutely awesome. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures from it, but it is truly amazing. I used to brag about the deep field picture from the Hubble Space Telescope. And everybody knows what the Big Dipper looks like. And if you go out at night with the Big Dipper and you put your hand under the handle next to the cup and you look at your little fingernail, Hubble took a picture, and in a space where there's nothing, there are hundreds of not only stars but galaxies. Webb has looked back even further in time, 13.1 billion years, and I understand that's been broken, and it's going to be able to look back like 13.5 billion years. We're talking the beginning of the universe is like 13.8 billion years, almost to the beginning of time as we know it. And they have just seen hundreds of galaxies and stars that have never been seen before. It's absolutely amazing. There was a picture of Jupiter that came out a few weeks ago, and we found moons that we didn't even know existed. We saw an aurora on the North Pole of Jupiter. So the science that's coming from James Webb is absolutely awesome. And that's what NASA does. NASA explores, NASA does things that nobody else can do for the benefit of all of us. And as General Higer said, this is a team sport, and we could not do it without our partners. As we go forward, I think that's the most important thing that we have to take. We are all on this planet together. We all need to work together as one to achieve our goals. And I hope that all of you, it's just absolutely amazing what we are doing, that you take time to appreciate what an amazing country we live in that is capable of doing all the things we do in aerospace. And I tell you, I am really looking forward to talking to some of the students later today. That is our future. I do not worry at all about our future. We have the brightest, youngest, the most amazing talent coming out of our universities today, and I know that we are going to continue to go on and do even greater things because of the partnerships that we have. It's all about teamwork and partnerships. Thank you very much for having me come and be here today on this historic day. It's absolutely awesome. I hope you enjoy your day, and thanks for all your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabana. As a token of our appreciation to commemorate this historic moment, everyone today will receive an American flag signified as a card, a certification of authenticity that was flown in the first supersonic flight in the Bell X-1 supersonic corridor. You can pick up a flag card in here, Hangar 1600, at the Operations Group booth on the other side of the Vista later this afternoon around noon. Please provide your name to the ladies at the table at your right. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony, and now let the 2022 Aerospace Valley Open House begin. Please enjoy our open house and the largest STEM expo in United States Air Force history, with 12,000 K-12 students and more than 60 hands-on displays. Please stand as the United States Air Force Band, the Golden West, plays the Air Force song. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.